Hello everyone. So I welcome you all in the module 9 of the NPTEL course of United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So in this module we are going to study SDG 1 Sustainable Development Goal, that is no poverty. So this is the first of the 17 SDGs. This is here in front of you, and why this is kept at the like a number 1, why it comes number 1, what is the reason behind it. Okay, well, you can introspect, but I personally feel for any human endeavor, for any like a well-being, education, health, consciousness towards like a environment, consciousness towards sustainability, society, economics, or any other like a living creature, it grows from where you are, at what kind of a footing you are standing at, what are the like accesses to like different resources and things and facilities you have. It begins from there, and that is where like a poverty is one of the most unfortunate like a conditions for any human being, any family, any individual, any person, any society. It poses tremendous challenges in front of them in any form of growth and development they can like aspire for. It prevents them to fulfilling, forget about goals, like aims in life, even the basic necessities, even like a feeding them, the 2 meals a day, like a proper decent like a cloth on the body and a shelter at the head, a rooftop at the head. And this is where I like a feel this has a lot of emotional appeal into this. This has like a very heart-wrenching like examples from around the world, in what kind of conditions our some of the brothers and sisters are living. Okay, and this is where this comes as like a first and foremost SDG, that in the name of humanity, in the name of growth and development, in the name of all of this what we have, we must aspire to bring those deprived families, individuals and households also into the main fold. So the aim of this SDG is to end poverty in all its forms everywhere. You can see it like right over here. It aims to end poverty in all its forms, because poverty also can have like a different forms, and well, in majority of the planet, in many of the continents, it is very very prevalent, and in some places, maybe in developed countries, it is not there so much, but in some form, maybe not that much of agony or empowerment, but maybe some lack of resources or some lack of like a things, but majorly it is present in the developing countries or underdeveloped countries. Majority of like a such people, households, communities are there in the sub-Saharan African region, some of the like South Asian regions, and some in the South American like places also. So we will see one by one. This is one video I recommend you all to watch. Maybe separately you can watch this video. Okay, to give you a glimpse, I have curated some cartoons, some illustrations which talks about the condition of poverty, because I feel a picture is worth 1,000 words. So just like I have a look of these, these illustrations, these visualizations carry a lot of weight, and they describe like a different situations, different like contexts, like a prevalent across like different parts of the world, and in what forms and in what ways like a poverty affects like a society. So in this one you can see the huge disparity between one person or maybe a set of like a people represented by this group, like we know it as like a rich people, you know so the resources like they have access to, the accumulation of resources like they have, compared to the far greater number of people who are deprived of like a same set of resources. The impact poverty can cause to the human society, it's still humongous. Perhaps we do not usually talk about it in the mainstream, well, maybe media or maybe education system, right, or other places. But I'm really happy that UN SDGs, they brought this as like a first SDG, and now through this same education system, through this course, through like my institute, you know our collective group of institutions, we are talking about it, we are discussing about it, and at least we are thinking about it, we are making like a sensitive about it, and definitely it is expected that things will improve, and we all must put in our efforts like together to address this situation. So it is stated that the mammoth impact what poverty can cause is still like is not shown in that proportion compared to the like impacts by other like elements, such as like recently we have encountered this pandemic the world has like faced, COVID-19. Okay, because COVID might like subside, it is kind of subsiding across different like places, but poverty is still is there in like huge numbers, mind-boggling numbers. Yeah, in this one what I understand, like a selected few, they may be purposefully or maybe I don't know like what to say, this illustration actually depicts they are depriving you know the majority to access like some resources. In this one, how do we define who is poor, who is not? Well, there is a benchmark. Okay, that benchmark is also a matter of like a contest, a matter of debate. Like how do you say like this much is enough, this much is not enough for one family's survival, livelihood, so that itself is a matter of debate and discussion, and this has been discussed in our country as well as like other places also, globally also. Like where do you define like that line as like a BPL? In India we know it as BPL, below poverty line. So the people who are living like a below like this line, you know this carries like a some like a earning like a per day per year, and if the income is below this they qualify under here, and if it is above they go like a above this. But the point of contention is whether like this much of like this wealth is enough for like access to the majority of the things what one like would strive for. Okay, so that also keeps on like a changing here and there, and sometimes it becomes a game of statistics. So how do we define that like that parameter? That also requires like equal attention. Well, and well, if you see the visuals of like a poverty from my like a places, it is really heart wrenching. I have just compiled one or two to give a glimpse, like in what kind of conditions like people are living in. Okay, so coming to the main content. Well, United Nations, they suggest by 2030, 167 million children will live in extreme poverty, because in poverty also there are, like a several layers. Okay, so extreme perhaps comes, even far below in the world if the world doesn't take action to improve health and education. So how these two, like health and education, if you see, they are themselves like, are different SDGs. If these are not taken care of, this will push 167 million children below extreme poverty. Okay. Well, how it is related? I'll give you some instances. With the proper health and nutrition, of course, we do not feel, like any shortcoming or any, like, any health related condition in our body, and we are typically like a fit and fine to perform our duties, perform our work, wherever we are, But if that is not the case, by the shortage of the, like a nutritional, like a values in the body, by not supplementing body with the enough, like a energy and, like other things, one's body is going to be diseased and will definitely fall short of like a required stamina, and will render, like a one conditioned or maybe diseased, and that will prevent you from, performing your day-to-day activities and your duties at your work. That will fetch you less money, less, like wages, and that may lead you to extreme poverty. Education, if you are not educated enough, or if your children, if your wards are not educated enough today, okay, definitely they may not have, like access to the jobs and employment abilities, employment, opportunities available, in the surrounding, or skill sets, which are desired for performing, certain types of, like a works, and that may again lead them to impoverished conditions. Okay, so these are, like some direct, like conditions where which contribute to the, like numbers of poverty. Okay, so overall with the SDGs, this SDG 1, what is the goal over here, why we are discussing it? Well, very simple straight line, like a one, like a sentence goal to end poverty in all its forms everywhere by 2030. Okay, it's a very simple one line, like a statement, but it is equally hard and a treacherous, like a path, for the world to achieve that. Well, for several decades and perhaps in the last century, this focus has been there in all the countries by all the governments to eradicate poverty, but unfortunately still, there. Perhaps, the efforts, being put up, they are not enough, or not at the right place, not at the right time. We need to, correct that and bring it to the, like a proper, like a results. Well, why is it needed? Why this goal is needed? More than 700 million people, or 11% of world population, still live in extreme poverty, please note that, and is struggling to fulfill the most basic needs like health, education, and access to water and sanitation, to name a few. There are a few more. Yes, the overwhelming majority of people living on less than 1.9 dollars US dollars a day live in Southern Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa, and they account for about 70% of the global total of extreme poor people. So now like which place, which like a part of the world to focus on. In 2017, economic losses attributed to natural disasters were estimated at over $300 billion, among the highest losses in recent years. However, this issue also affects developed countries. Right now, there are 30 million children growing up poor in the world's richest countries. Why there is so much poverty in the world? Poverty has many dimensions, but its causes include unemployment. What causes poverty? Social exclusion and high vulnerability of certain population to disasters, diseases, and other phenomena. So you can see these keywords where one needs to, put in, their aim, because if you improve these conditions, this will contribute to, improving the poverty line. I'm not poor. Why should I care about other people's economic situation? Well, there can be several reasons. Even if you are not poor, why you should, work for this? Why you should, work for the improving this situation? There are many reasons, but in short, because all human beings, our well-being is linked to each other. We have seen it, like a beforehand, how it is, like a interconnected, how human society actually works, and we are all, like a connected at many places. Maybe cyclically, maybe directly, maybe indirectly, right? Growing inequality is detrimental to economic growth and undermines social cohesion, increasing political and social tensions, and in some circumstances, driving instability and conflicts. Can we actually achieve this goal? Yes. There are many success stories we have seen previously, and this also can be done. To end extreme poverty worldwide in 20 years, economist Jeffrey Sachs calculated that the total cost per year would be about $175 billion. This represents less than 1% of the combined income of the richest countries in the world. So if you see, like this figure alone is a very big amount. But the world's richest countries, this is less than 1% of, like a combined income. Okay. So even if a handful of countries contribute, like a less than 1% of their combined income, this can be done. But sorry to say, like this is not happening, right? So this is where like efforts are like needed. Combined efforts are needed, right? So what can I do about it? If you are a young person, well, there are depending upon your profile, your like a capacity in which you can contribute. It differs definitely. In this particular class, through this course, we are learning what is it and how this can be done. Definitely tomorrow at your workplace, you will be holding some responsibility. Like you will be undertaking some activities, whether you are an engineer, you are an architect, you are an artist, you are an entrepreneur, you are a house, like a like a person who is taking care of your household, irrespective of your gender, you are an elderly, you are like a child, maybe an adult, you are a government employee, you are maybe a private, entrepreneur, or maybe an employee, irrespective of all of this, we all have, like a certain, like a role to play, beginning from this first, like a noble one, where, at least sensitizing our society, about this whole thing. Then, preparing the action plan based on, like a particular, like a place, particular community, particular maybe a set of like a people, particular country in that particular context, with the means, definitely you can work towards this, okay, to improve it. Well, let's quickly see what are the targets under, like this SDG 1. So the official indicator framework for SDG 1 proposes, like a 13 indicators for goal 1. Those are listed over here. We'll see them, like a one by one. So the first target is by 2030, eradicate extreme poverty of all people everywhere, currently measured at people living on less than 1.25 US dollars a day. So that is that benchmark, and very simple, straightforward, like a target. Well, indicators for this: proportion of the population living below the international poverty line by sex, age, employment status, and geographic location, urban or rural. 1.2 by 2030, reduce at least by half the proportion of men, women, and children of all ages living in poverty in all its dimensions according to national definitions. Indicators, there are two: proportion of population living below the national poverty line Like every nation also has, you know, like a this line, you know, compared to this international poverty line. And proportion of men, women and children of all is living in poverty in all its dimensions according to national definitions. So how do you define locally in your own country? That also might, you know, like a differ. Like US has, you know, like a certain some other definition. India has something else, you know, like UK has, you know, like something else. Perhaps South America has something else. And if I go by, maybe Brazil has something else, maybe Kenya has something else, maybe Nigeria has something else, you know, maybe Sudan has something else, Syria has something else, right? What do they define at their own, you know, like a, you know, like a, at their own administrative level? Because if you see, US dollars, you know, like they have a, you know, like a global, you know, like this recognition compared to any other countries, you know, like a value where it stands. Okay. And based on that, you know, purchasing power, you know, like a parity is defined. Based on the livability index is defined. You know, based on that, the cost of goods and services also gets, you know, like a defined. Okay. So what is the cost of goods and services? You know, one needs to, you know, have access to the basic, you know, like a commodities, you know, what we call is that commodities. Okay. That, you know, like a set of things in any country. Okay. So perhaps based on that, you will be, you know, like a undertaking your own, you know, like a BPL, you know, that line, that poverty line, and undertaking your own, you know, like actions, framing your own policies, maybe implementing your own, you know, like schemes. 1.3, implement nationally appropriate social protection systems and measures for all, including 4 floors, and by 2030 achieve substantial coverage of the poor and the vulnerable. 1.4, by 2030 ensure that all men and women, in particular the poor and the vulnerable, have equal rights to economic resources, as well as access to basic services, ownership and control over land and other forms of property, inheritance, natural resources, appropriate new technology and financial services, including microfinance. So if you see, this covers, you know, like a majority of the things, you know, one can actually, you know, like ask for in their life. And we know, like people, you know, coming from the lower strata, usually they do not have access to these things, and that's why they are poor. Because if you have land, you can make use of that land to, you know, perhaps, you know, like agriculture, you can grow your own produce. First of all, you can feed on, you know, that yourself or your family. If you have surplus, you can sell. But since you do not own, you know, a piece of land, you are, you know, definitely deprived of that opportunity, that you cannot put your own physical labor and, you know, do something, right? So one must actually have, you know, like land, access to the land, first of all. That's why it is talking about, you know, control over land and other forms of property, like at least a house. You know, other forms of property means, you know, like maybe a house where you can, you know, like take your own shelter in your own house. You are not forced to live on the street or live on, you know, maybe in the shelter houses or maybe, you know, like other places, right? Then coming down to the other things like natural resources, maybe access to, you know, like a fresh air, fresh water, you know, like a maybe, you know, like a firewood. You know, if you talk about, you know, like a poor people, you know, this is what they are looking for, right? Then coming down to, you know, little more inheritance. Inheritance, you know, also includes, you know, number of things, new technologies. Like, you know, we are easily, you know, like have access to internet today, but perhaps not, you know, to everybody, right? So, you know, this course we are conducting online, you know, I'm preparing this course, you know, like online, I'm distributing it online. I have also prepared, you know, using, you know, internet and, you know, other electronic, you know, like devices, you know. If that is not there, you know, how the person whom I intend to deliver this lecture is going to have access to it? Okay. So technology and democratization of technology is an essential, you know, like a thing, you know, a thing, you know. So I'll write, you know, like this term, democratization of technology. Unless and until, you know, like a technology is a kind of, you know, like a thing accessible only to the privileged, you know, this democratization is still not addressed, right? So we definitely need, because whatever like humanity is evolving today is for everybody, it must be for everybody, right? And it plays a huge role in controlling it, and this is why we need this, including microfinance. Yeah, so financial services, of course, like banking is an organized like a financial service we can avail, like we are all like availing it also, but perhaps not all of us. Microfinance, what is microfinance? Like helping an individual or a household or maybe a community in smaller sets of like a financial like a help, so that they can do something with that like a help, micro financial like a help, and stand independently economically. Okay, maybe they can start producing something, maybe start they can start rendering some services, maybe they can become small like a part of like a one, maybe like a supply chain, or maybe like a like a, or something like that. Well, in the prevalent economic terms you can understand, right? If they are like that, they can grow. One example I would like to give over here, from the craft sector. Okay, we know crafts are very traditional, like art forms. They have like evolved, at places, risen from the ground. Taking cues from local, like resources, art forms, styles, materials, and things like that. But if you connect, like these, like a craft forms, to some economic activity and start selling this, you know, to the people who want to buy those, okay, definitely, like those coins, those, like rupees are going to, reach to those people, you know, who are, like empowered with this, like a crafting. So linking these two can definitely, carry this potential to help them. Right, so this is one example. You can say like this craft also, like bamboo based craft, or maybe textile based craft, or maybe like a lacquer based craft, or maybe wooden toys based craft, or things like that. A lot of such examples actually exist from like all parts of our country, and it is not that like difficult to understand. You may be also knowing like a variety of like such things what people like do at places, maybe in your vicinity. Maybe you can like focus towards this. 1.5, by 2030, build the resilience of the poor and those in vulnerable situations, and reduce their exposure and vulnerability to climate related extreme events and other economic, social, and environmental shocks and disasters. Because these actually pose further challenges. Some challenges, they are like occurring like all the time. These are like a timely, maybe once in a while kind of like a situations. Like for example, a cyclone. The cyclone and came and maybe broke your house. It kind of tore apart your house. Now you are shelterless, right? So what are you going to do about it? Maybe if you have economic power, maybe definitely next day, in a month's time, you will be able to recover, and in few months time you will be able to build back your own house. But if you do not have access to like enough resources or wealth, it is definitely a new challenge for you, to build your own house again, right? Because even one time was like a difficult. Now again, building it is going to take like equal resources, right? So how and where are you going to get them? Other like a climate related extreme, like like a rising like a temperatures, like rising levels of water, they are all posing like a challenges. We know like these climatic like effects which are taking place at global level. Some places are getting like excessively flood, some places are getting like excessively like drought kind of situations. These are the phenomena which are putting challenges to like living beings at different places, right? So these are the environmental shocks, you can say, or like a disasters, natural disasters, which are like a threatening humanity. Ensures significant mobilization of resources from a variety of sources. So mobilization, because resources might be existing, but if they are not delivered to the like a needy at different place, okay, at this place maybe they are lying idle, and maybe this place somebody needs it, okay. So how this can be like carried, and that need can be met. including through enhanced development cooperation. First of all, in order to provide adequate and predictable means for developing countries, this happens between countries. Maybe some country rich in minerals, ores and things like that. Some country doesn't have that much of land to like a kind of get those. So both can help each other and meet their like a needs. In particular, least developed countries to implement programs and policies to empower knowledge damage. Create sound policy frameworks at national, regional and international levels based on pro-poor and gender-sensitive development strategies to support accelerated investment in poverty eradication actions. So if you see, there is like an investment and there is an accelerated investment, because some pockets of like a countries where there are like extreme impoverished like conditions are still prevailing. Okay, so there of course you need to go like overdrive and like help like preventing like these things.